Welcome to Prime 9, the countdown show that covers the very best in baseball. Guaranteed to start arguments, not end them. This week we look at the 9 greatest all-star moments. Why 9? That's baseball. 9 players, 9 innings, Prime 9. You are about to witness the 9 greatest moments in all-star history. Not the best games. This stuff took place during all-star games.
An inside-the-park home run.
That may have been a triple for me. May have.
Moments that have remained in our consciousness far longer than the game itself.
First home run of the series.
Oh, and by the way, home run derbies don't count.
Josh Hamilton has 50,000-plus New Yorkers chanting his name!
Before we start, we thought you might like to know which moments didn't make the list, like All-Star Game winning home runs. Incredible fielding plays.
What a catch by Hunter.
And unforgettable, sometimes humorous encounters.
Would you say his heart is palpitating a bit?
Even Willie Mays, who was practically made for All-Star games, doesn't have a moment on our list.
No.
There have been 79 Major League All-Star games played through 2008. And these are the greatest moments that took place in those games. We begin with number 9 on Prime 9. The 2001 All-Star Game featured the Iron Man in his final year in the majors.
From the Baltimore Orioles, third baseman Cal Ripken Jr.
I don't know whether I fully deserved to be there. I didn't have the best first half. I was voted in the end, and because the All-Star Game was such a wonderful experience, I wanted to kind of go out doing something.
Cal took his position at third, but to honor him, a heartfelt move had been planned.
Cal Ripken Jr. should start this game as a shortstop.
Just before the game starts, when the players are being introduced, A-Rod goes over to Ripken.
This is my spot for 1 inning. I'm going to shortstop for 1 inning. I'm not going to shortstop.
A-Rod thought of a wonderful tribute to switch positions for an inning, as if to say thanks for paving the way.
I don't want to go. Hey, he has to.
I really wanted to tell him something else, but I realized that I had a mic on.
The whole stadium knows. Give me some. The whole stadium knows. I'm the third base. You got to go to short for 1 inning.
When I looked in the dugout, I realized that everybody else knew about it but me. And Joe Torre was saying, come on over there and go to shortstop.
I remember that, and I thought, this is going to be a great, great night for Cal Ripken.
Truer words were never spoken, for what happened next topped everyone's expectations.
Hey, Piazza sign.
Cal Ripken Jr. stands in to lead it off for the American League in the bottom of the third.
When I finally did come to the plate, the reception I felt from everyone in Seattle was pretty overwhelming. They kept clapping, and I stood out and said thank you in the best way I could. And then I had to get back in the box and try to focus.
I've been around Big Brother for 43 years now. I've learned something about him. Whenever it's a big moment, he seems to rise to the occasion.
There's a high fly ball to left field. Did he do it? Did he do it? He did! Cal Ripken Jr. on his first at-bat in his last All-Star game hits a home run. Who wrote this script?
Could Hollywood do a better script than having Cal Ripken come into a game, his last All-Star game, and hit a home run? What a great moment that was.
What a good buy. That is just unbelievable.
A single would have been fine, but that home run really kind of catapulted me, and I came in, and I was really well received by all the other guys.
And they're not going to stop until he gives them one. There he is.
And to make this memorable day complete, Cal got to etch his name in the All-Star Game record books.
He is the first American League 2-time MVP winner.
It was pretty overwhelming, and it really put a final stamp on my All-Star Game career.
The 50th anniversary of the All-Star Game was celebrated in Chicago, the hometown of Angels outfielder Fred Lynn, and Fred was hoping to do something special.
That was my 9th All-Star appearance, and prior to that, we'd lost every game that I'd ever played in an All-Star game. And as American Leaguers, we were really tired of hearing about it. We're trying to get the monkey off our back here.
Leading 5-1 in the third inning, they appeared primed to do so, and that's when Lynn made history.
Well, now they're going to walk Robin Yount, and that'll load up the bases.
They walked Robin Yount to get to me. Now, that doesn't really set too well with me at any point in my career, or even like in Little League, you don't want to do that. So you have my full attention when that happens.
Let's go, Freddie.
I faced Atlee Hammaker early in the season in spring training. I knew what he had. Got to 2-2, and he got me out with sliders in spring training, and I looked for that slider, and I got it.
And he drives it to deep right. Back goes Murphy, away back, and there it is.
When I was rounding first, I kind of did a little fist pump, and I never did that kind of stuff. I didn't want to show anybody up. But I was just happy that I knew we were going to win.
The first grand slam in All-Star history.
Never forget being out there in right field and watching that ball go over my head. It was a great time for Fred Lynn and not so great time for us.
We ended up winning that game, I think, 13-3. And ever since then, the American League has dominated the National League, the All-Star game.
Lynn's slam in his final All-Star appearance capped off quite a Midsummer Classic resume. 6 hits and 20 at-bats, 4 home runs, and 10 RBI, and he's still the only man ever to hit a grand slam in the All-Star game.
To see somebody as talented as a Freddie Lynn be able to hit a grand slam, it was a great moment.
It was definitely a magical moment, one of the biggest moments, I think, in All-Star history.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the 9 greatest moments in All-Star history. You've heard the stories about 9 and 8. We now continue with number 7. Prior to the 1970 All-Star Game, the National League had won 7 straight, and they were determined to keep that streak alive by coming back to score 3 runs in the 9th.
The game was tied, and it went on to extra innings.
With the game still tied in the 12th, Pete Rose moved into scoring position, and that set the stage for an epic collision.
1-1 to the waiting Jim Hickman. Up the middle.
Pete was under full speed, and he took Ray Fosse out at home plate.
Moses coming to the plate. He's in. It's all over.
I was concentrating on the ball. I had no idea where he was and running. I was reaching for the ball, and he hit me.
Pete Rose barreled into Ray Fosse, who is slow in getting up.
It was scary. When he hit Ray Fosse, I mean, you can hear that sound in the whole park. And, you know, everybody just stood around because Ray laid there for a while.
Fosse was really hurt, and he was out for a while after that, but actually never really became the same guy.
More than 35 years later, the frightening play is still a subject for debate.
People have talked a lot about that play, about it shouldn't have happened because it was an All-Star game, but that's the way Pete Rose played.
You know, Pete was just like that. When he on that field, he just like a wild man. There ain't no stop sign for Pete. And I don't think Pete intent to hurt Ray.
If you see the replay on that play, I did start to slide, but he left me no recourse because there was no place to slide.
That's one of the hardest plays I ever seen in baseball, seeing a guy get hit. But that's the way he played the game. He wanted to win.
By the time Bo Jackson made his first All-Star game in 1989, his reputation was exceeded only by the tales it spawned.
One scout that looked at him and said, let me tell you how great the guy is. The guy hit a 400-foot home run and ran out and caught it. He had that kind of talent.
His fans knew what Bo could do and worked hard to get him there.
What I remember was this whole campaign around Bo. They had handed out signs and everything because this was going to be Bo's moment.
I just wanted to go out and see if I can compete on the same level with all of the other Major League Baseball players that was selected to the All-Star game.
Determined to put on a show for his peers, Bo went shopping.
I searched around. I found the heaviest bat that I could find.
Bo was so strong, it was just a matter of when Bo got a hold of it.
I just sat back and waited on my pitch, and I golf swung.
Bo Jackson says hello.
I didn't even know I hit it until I heard the whack. And the next thing you know, it's 3/4 of the way up the tarp.
He almost hit it out of state.
I just remember seeing it and saying, wow, you know, that's what it's like when he gets a hold of it.
I don't think he surprised anybody by hitting the ball 450 feet, but on that stage, it was just a moment that crystallized who he was for the sports public.
After reaching first his next time up, Bull stole seconds.
Jackson is on his way to third.
Joining the great Willie Mays as the second man ever to hit a home run and steal a base in the All-Star game. And that's how you become the All-Star MVP.
That was the magic of Bo. This All-Star game was almost marketed to be Bo's time, and he did what great athletes do. He rose to the occasion.
It was good to see that he has that kind of a signature moment because his health didn't allow him to really become one of the greatest baseball or football players in history.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the 9 greatest moments in All-Star history. Ripken's home run was number 9, followed by Fred Lynn's slam. Then came Pete Rose with a hard slam of his own, and the bodacious one, which means it's time for number 5. The 1971 All-Star Game looked like a Cooperstown Express, with 21 future Hall of Famers on the rosters.
Guys like Johnny Bench, Frank Robinson, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey. When you look back on that, and you go, my goodness, look at these Hall of Famers.
With the wind blowing out of Tiger Stadium that day, 6 of those men who now have plaques went deep, but none went farther than Reggie.
The wind was blowing out, but the wind had nothing to do with Reggie's shot.
There's a long drive. That one is going way up. It is off the roof. A tremendous smash.
That home run that Reggie Jackson hit at Tiger Stadium was the hardest hit ball I ever saw. I didn't think it would ever land anywhere. It was hit so hard.
No doubt about this one. A tremendous home run.
That hit the transformer up there.
Unfortunately, he hit that transformer up there, and it kept it from being measured how far that ball would have went.
It would have gone to China, Australia, or somewhere, because nobody ever hit a ball as hard as Reggie Jackson did that night at Detroit.
Reggie could hit a home run. That's what he did, and if he got his pitch, it was going out of the ballpark.
Everyone loves to watch a tape measure shot, and Reggie Jackson is no exception, especially when it's his own.
He loves to be on the center stage with the spotlight as bright as it can be on him. And if it's not, he'll do something to make sure that spotlight does shine on him. And it's a moment that we'll never forget in All-Star history.
The 1994 All-Star Game in Pittsburgh is part of a stretch where the American League is dominating the National League. I think the American League had won 6 in a row. And you've got the specter of the strike looming.
Everybody's talking about the strike, but for the players involved, it's still National League versus American League, and the American League had our number, and us National Leaguers wanted to turn that around.
But they trailed by 2 in the bottom of the 9th when, with a runner on first and 1 out, Fred McGriff faced Lee Smith.
Well, Lee Smith, he has a great arm, but he loved his fastball. You know, he wasn't scared. Lee was going to get it, throw it, and say, here it is, hit it.
I was a little bit hesitant to go out to the mound and say, hey, listen, please don't throw Fred McGriff a fastball. Well, I didn't go because, you know, these guys are all-stars, and you say, okay, you give them the benefit of the doubt, but he threw one.
And the ball is sliding to left center field. She's gone! It's tied at 7.
And then all of a sudden we're even, and we were really excited about having a chance to possibly win the game.
Something Tony would predict in the bottom of the 10th.
Will Clark is playing first base for the Rangers, and Moises Alou is coming up to the plate, and I'm telling Will, I said, look, if he tries to sneak a fastball in, this game's gonna be over.
Swinging a drive into the gap in left center field.
And I take off running.
This could do it. Being waved home is Gwynn.
Jim Leland, the Pirates manager, is coaching third base.
I don't even see him. I did not even look at him. I pretty much made up my mind about halfway to third I was going to try to score.
Ripken took the relay and threw to Ivan Rodriguez, and there was a very close play at the plate.
Right as I start my slide, I see Pudge getting his hands ready to catch the ball, and I'm thinking, I have to get my foot in. And it's the only time in my career I really acted like I was, in high school. spontaneous, yeah!
And the 6-game drought is over for the National League.
For that one night, I think everybody forgot about all the labor strife. It was about baseball, and it just capped off extremely memorable and probably one of the greatest All-Star games of all time.
Pedro Martinez, in the heart of his career, was a magnificent pitcher.
A dominating guy who would just blow away hitters, and he could get it up there at 96, 97 miles an hour.
You talk about domination.
He was an event every time he pitched.
Selected to start the 1999 All-Star Game on his home field in Boston, Pedro bore witness to a landmark tribute honoring the game's all-time greats.
There was a great celebration that night of the All-Century team.
Together, these players represent the most talent ever assembled on a baseball field.
There was a lot of emotion in the ballpark that night, probably one of the greatest pregame ceremonies ever in All-Star history.
George, Brett, Hank, Aaron, Ted Williams.
Pedro watched that very closely and was very moved by all of the great players who were there that night. He didn't want to go out and start that game on a down note.
An inspired Martinez faced a lineup that opened with Barry Larkin, Larry Walker, Sammy Sosa, and Mark McGwire. But Pedro wasn't about to disappoint his fans.
I remember seeing Pedro and telling him to take it easy, don't be trying to get all hyped up just because he was pitching in front of his hometown fans. And of course he was, so he was throwing about 120.
Larkin way late.
And then Pedro threw me one of those Bugs Bunny change-ups.
And a good start for Pedro Martinez in the American League.
He was certainly one of the best pitchers that I've seen in my generation, and when he was on, there were not a lot of things that you can do to counteract him.
And he's gone, and Martinez exciting the Fenway crowd. Strikes out the first two.
Buzz at Fenway Park was amazing. The fans, of course, loved him because he was one of their own.
2 balls, 2 strikes on Sosa. And the Boston crowd celebrates.
Here you are, you have some of the best hitters in the game kind of scratching their heads the way he was throwing that night.
4 consecutive strikeouts for Pedro Martinez.
We're talking about a time it was probably the greatest extended run of slugging in baseball history. And you had this 5'10", 170-pound soaking wet guy out there just buzzing his way through some of the greatest hitters of all time.
Oh, it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. You talk about electrifying, that was electrifying.
We now return to Prime 9, where this week we're focusing on the 9 greatest moments in the All-Star Game. These are all fantastic feats from the Midsummer Classic that have stayed with us from one season to the next. So now it's time for the very best, the greatest moments in All-Star Game history. We begin with number 2. The 1941 All-Star Game in Detroit had an air of electricity about it. For back then, the two leagues didn't need an incentive to get their blood boiling.
There was still a genuine, serious rivalry between the leagues. The 9 starters played the full game. Pitchers went 3 innings or more. There was an intent to win those games.
And all eyes were on Ted Williams, smack dab in the middle of his .406 season, but plenty loose.
Say, Ted, got any base hits in that bat of yours?
Oh, I think I'm going to do all right.
What makes you think so?
Well, I've always hit good in this Detroit park. They throw in where I'm swinging, and I'll be swinging. Might mean the old ball game.
The American League was losing 5-4 in the bottom of the 9th. They had a few men on base. The National League missed by an eyelash of completing a double play, which would have ended the game.
2 outs. The winning runs on the sacks, and look who's up. Ted Williams. Remember that promise, Ted. If you got a hit in that bat, let's have it now.
Russell pitches. Williams swings. There's a high drive going deep, deep. It is a home run against the tip top of the right field stand.
Oh, I was so happy and I was so proud. Then I saw myself galloping around the base and clapping my hand.
Williams dancing around the bases, hopping and skipping. To give you an idea of the importance that was attached to the All-Star game in that era, Williams in his book described that as the most important hit of his career.
Yes, hitting that home run in the All-Star game in the ninth inning was certainly a big thrill that I'll never forget the rest of my life.
Carl Hubble has exceptional control. First, low inside, high outside. Third, low outside. And now, in slow motion, high inside. Watch it. There is perfect control.
He had the trickiest pitch that any batter had ever seen, which was the screwball.
Which was a reverse curve. The pitch would dive down into the feet of left-handed hitters and away from right-handed hitters.
Carl's mastery of the screwball helped make him a Hall of Famer. But it was at an All-Star game that he became a legend.
In 1934, it was only the second All-Star game ever played. And Carl Hubble's performance in that game, in a sense, put the All-Star game on the map to stay forever.
Hubble started and allowed the first two men to reach base. Not good, not with Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Jimmy Fox coming up. Those three sluggers are now all in Cooperstown, having hit more than 1,700 home runs between them.
There was enough power in that trio to illuminate a small city.
First came Ruth, only the greatest hitter who ever lived. And in the face of this greatness, Hubble had a plan.
What I tried to do was to strike Ruth out. He's the only one I was really trying to strike out. Hubble, working methodically, with tremendous self-assurance, he struck out Ruth.
Then you've got the great Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig.
Perhaps the greatest RBI man in all of baseball history. But Hubble, working very carefully and again methodically, he struck out Gehrig. So now there were two out, and Jimmy Fox was up.
One of the strongest power hitters of any generation, Double X, also got screwed up by Hubble's signature pitch.
I was just trying to get Fox out the best way I knew how. And Hubble struck out Fox. It seems that Carl had done the impossible.
But there was more. For Hubble returned to the mound in the second inning, where he would face two more Hall of Famers in Al Simmons and Joe Cronin. Now it was their turn.
He just threw them that screwball, struck out the next two in the next inning, and I don't think that feat has ever been equaled in baseball history.
75 years later, it is still the greatest performance in the history of All-Star games. The idea that Carl Hubble could strike out 5 of the greatest hitters in the history of baseball together is just beyond imagination.
Ruth, Gehrig, Fox, Simmons, Cronin. Hubble faced this formidable firing squad, and he survived unscathed, throwing that little screwball that nobody could hit.
One more thing before we go. 52 years after Hubble's amazing feat, another National League lefty with an equally deceptive screwball almost duplicated it in the '86 All-Star Game. He struck out Don Mattingly, Cal Ripken, Jesse Barfield, Lou Whitaker, and Teddy Higuera in succession.
Fernando has struck out the 5 he's faced. I tell you, shades of Carl Hubble back in 1934.
Granted, only one of Fernando's victims proved to be a Hall of Famer, but all 5 were All-Stars, and that ranks pretty high in our books. And since this seems to happen every half-century or so, we can't wait to see who does it again in 2035. That's our Prime 9. What's yours?